This is Learning with Coach History. Hey everyone, this is the first lesson of 7 in Progressivism. Today we'll talk about the origins of Progressivism, and you'll learn about the social reforms that make up the Progressive movement. The vocab, Progressive Movement, Florence Kelley, Prohibition, Muckraker, Scientific Management, Henry Ford, Robert M. La Follette, Initiative, Referendum, Recall, and 17th Amendment. As the 1900s opened, reformers pushed for a number of changes. Together, their efforts build the progressive movement. The progressive movement had four major goals. First, to protect social welfare. Second, to promote moral improvement. Third, to create economic reform. And the fourth is to foster efficiency. Reformers tried to promote social welfare by easing the problems of city life. The YMCA built libraries and exercise rooms. The Salvation Army fed poor people in the cities and cared for children in nurseries. Settlement houses helped families. One reformer, Florence Kelley, helped to win the passage of the Illinois Factory Act in 1893. The law prohibited child labor and limited women's working hours. The law became a model for other states. Reformers promoted moral reform by working for prohibition, or the banning of alcoholic drinks. Many of these reformers, called prohibitionists, were members of the Women's Christian Temperance Union, or WCTU. The WCTU saw much growth under the leadership of Frances Willard. The well-organized union became the largest women's group in the country. Some temperance groups, such as the Anti-Saloon League, found themselves in conflict with immigrant groups. After all, immigrant customs often included the use of alcohol. Even so, the Anti-Saloon League had much political influence. The work of their members led to the banning of alcohol in many states. A large number of towns, cities, and wards, also rural areas, also voted to outlaw alcohol. The reformers tried to make economic changes by pointing out the great inequality between the rich and the poor. They pushed for better treatment of workers. Some Americans questioned the capitalist economic style and supported socialism. Labor leader Eugene Debs helped form the American Socialist Party and spoke out about the power of business. Journalists, called muckrakers, wrote stories about corruption and unfair practices in business. One such journalist was Ida M. Tarbell. Other muckrakers exposed dangerous working conditions, such as child labor and unsafe products. To help make businesses more efficient and profitable, some reformers promoted the idea of scientific management. Scientific management was the brainchild of Frederick Winslow Taylor, who wanted to find ways to make industry more efficient. The idea was to apply scientific ideas to make each task simpler. One outcome was the assembly line. Inventor and businessman Henry Ford introduced the assembly line, and this greatly changed American manufacturing. Ford used an assembly line to efficiently produce his Ford Model T automobile. Ford kept his car simple and identical so that it could be easily mass produced. Such mass production made the cars cheaper to make and therefore more affordable for the general public. The assembly line had drawbacks as well as benefits. The new system of manufacturing required people to work like machines. Not all workers could work at the same rate. At a fast pace, some workers became overtired and injured themselves on the job. Ford tried to keep workers happy by reducing the workday and paying workers $5 a day. Workers seemed willing to accept the hardship of working on the assembly line for the attractive pay. Progressives also reformed politics. City governments were sometimes corrupt, ran by party bosses who gave jobs to their friends and bribed people to vote for them. One answer to this problem was a new system of city government called commission system. In the commission system, A group of experts runs the city. Each expert takes charge of a different city department. By 1917, about 500 cities had commission formed of city government. Another reform idea was the council manager form of government. By 1925, nearly 250 cities had managers. These managers were appointed by councils elected by the people. Some cities had progressive mayors. For example, progressive mayor Hazen Pingree served in Detroit and Tom Johnson led Cleveland. They improved cities without changing their system of government. They put in such reforms as fair tax systems and lower public transportation fares. Reformers also worked at the state level. Many states had progressive governors. These states passed laws to regulate railroads, mines, telephone companies, and other large businesses. Robert M. La Follette, as governor of Wisconsin, led the way in regulating big business. He worked hard to ensure that voters, rather than business leaders, controlled government. His reforms of the railway industry taxed railroad properties at the same rate as other business properties. He set up a commission to regulate rates and forbade railroads to issue free passes to state officials. Other governors also worked to limit the role of big business. These governors include Charles Aycock of North Carolina and James Hogg of Texas. Progressives also helped improve working conditions and end child labor. Factories hired children because children could do the same unskilled work as adults for less money. Often, wages were so low that every member of a family needed to work. A group called the National Child Labor Committee investigated the harsh working conditions of children. Their efforts helped ensure passage of the Keating-Owen Act, which prohibited goods produced through child labor from being transported across state lines. Progressive reformers did not get a federal law to ban child labor. They did, however, get state legislators to prohibit it. The states also set maximum hours for all workers. Progressives also won some reforms from the Supreme Court. In the case Mueller v. Oregon, the court decided that a state could legally limit the working hours of women. Attorney Louis D. Brandeis successfully argued this case. In 1917, the Supreme Court upheld a 10-hour workday for men in the Bunting v. Oregon decision. Electoral reforms at the state level gave voters more power. William Uren led his state of Oregon to become the first to adopt the secret ballot, giving voters privacy. 3 other reforms of the time were important. The first, initiative, gives voters themselves the right to propose a law. The second, voters could accept or reject the initiative by a direct vote on the initiative, called a referendum. And third, voters got the right of recall, which means they could force a government official to face another election. Minnesota became the first state to use a mandatory statewide direct primary system. This meant that voters, instead of political machines, would choose candidates for public office through a special popular election. The direct primary led to the passage of the 17th Amendment. The amendment called for senators to be elected directly by the people instead of by state lawmakers.